With the launch of the Sony and Microsoft next generation consoles behind us, and with this also the traditional time of the year for heavy-hitting AAA releases, it feels kind of fitting to perhaps take a step back to check out a handful of indie games, our hidden gems, you might have missed when they first came out. First up, we have Rivals, a narrative puzzle game firmly in the mode of one of the best games from 2018, Return of the Obra Dinn. However, rather than piece together what happened to the crew of that particular vessel, in Rivals, you put together the story of what happened to cause the breakup of a rather fine-sounding indie band. Actually, the music on its own is pretty outstanding, and wouldn't sit out of place with the kind of tunes that played out on the radio of the time in which this one's set. As the band's biographer, you go about sifting through posters, notepads, tour info and interviews for clues both fictional and based on real-world events. It's creative, enjoyable and really does need to be seen and played by more people. Rivals came out in September for PC via Steam and itch.io. Up next, and another puzzler from earlier in the year, Path of Giants sees you take control of 3 explorers as they traverse the titular Path of Giants in search of adventure and lost treasure amongst icy caverns and snow-topped mountains. For the most part, the puzzles are relatively straightforward, although things do ramp up in difficulty terms towards the middle and end stages of the game. What the team over at Journey Bound Games have done so well comes from the dialogue and personality they've been able to impart into each of the characters. Each are very much their own if you follow, with their differing personalities bringing depth and in places a subtle sense of humour. It's also rather pretty to look and listen to, and while not overly troubling the top 2 inches, all in it's a well-made piece of entertainment that will appeal to both adults and kids of all ages. Path of Giants can be found on PC via Steam and by way of iOS, and also on the Nintendo Switch.
Hey, come on, wake up! Wake up!
Coming up next, South of the Circle came out towards the end of October just gone, and sadly for now at least, it's only available via the Apple Arcade. Now we're certainly hoping this one gets a port onto PC and most certainly onto the Switch, where we think it would find a really good home for itself. Let's get right to the point. South of the Circle is perhaps the finest story-driven game to have come out in the second half of this year. It really is that good, and we're fairly sure it's bookended itself somewhere within our forthcoming Game of the Year rundown that's due out in a few weeks' time. However, like most narrative adventures, going too deeply into the plot would be far too spoilery, although it's safe to say it's a really charming and compelling tale of love and adventure, all within the backdrop of the Cold War. Aside from the story, we're also really taken with the overall art style, particularly with the landscapes and characters with their subtle pastel aesthetics. Of course, this won't be for everybody. Hey, let's be honest, this won't be for a lot of folks, and yet if you do like these narrative experiences, then you really should play South of the Circle. Moving on, and with something a little more lively, we have Sayonara Wild Hearts, and with it, we have a game that many folks were gushing over when it came out towards the tail end of last year. However, it sadly seems to have had limited cut-through in terms of people actually playing it, so on that, we wanted to give it a little signal boost. Best thought of as part music installation, part game, within an expressive and super catchy techno chiptune soundtrack, again all within visually impressive character designs inspired by the teddy girl subculture of the 1950s. While you are on rails throughout, it mixes and merges different genres with ease, from side-scrollers to first-person shooters to rhythm sections and much more. The levels are all short, sharp and intensive, with there being a considerable pull to play over and over, to hear Queen Latifah cry "Gold Rank" at the end of each section. Just like Journey, Sayonara Wild Hearts is a game we'll be coming back to play over and over, with it being available on PC via Steam, Apple Arcade, and all of the usual consoles. And moving on again to something a little more tranquil. Up next we have The Stillness of the Wind, which came out onto PC and the Nintendo Switch in late February 2019. Best if perhaps a tad lazily described as being within the farming come Stardew Valley genre. All here we have a generally peaceful game featuring an old woman, her farm where she lives, where she tends a few crops, churns cheese, and all the while living with her cat, goat, and a few chickens. Now, while this doesn't sound that entertaining, The Stillness of the Wind is yet another cracking example of a narrative-heavy experience that's able to pull you right into the character, her day-to-day existence, with you forming your own pattern of routine in how you look after your farm, and within the daily meetings with a trader where you trade, barter, and gossip. The loneliness of the farm is further enhanced with the flow of letters you receive from siblings and your children, all of whom seem to live disparate lives away in the city, far from home. It's finely paced, and something you can play through in the course of an evening, and while short, it's long in how it makes you feel and care for the elderly protagonist. Up next, and all the way back to the first quarter of 2017, Under Leaves is a delicate hidden objects puzzler of sorts, where you're tasked with spotting various things throughout any of the given scenes. And what scenes they are! They're all so beautiful, with them featuring forests, jungles, underwater landscapes, and more. The gameplay is simple enough. All told, you can crack through this one in perhaps under an hour, which from a time perspective will displease some, although for us, there are worse ways in which to pass 60 or so minutes. Having once again played through it before penning this video is perfectly passable. Under Leaves is available to play on PC, iOS, and Android. Onwards and to the last of the games within this November 2020 rundown of indie game hidden gems. Katana Zero came out in April of last year, and to be honest, it, like so many others, was pretty much lost to us amongst the noise of other games coming out within the indie game marketplace. So yes, we came to this one and played it only recently, just a month or so ago, and by goodness, this wasn't the game to have slept on. It's utterly fantastic, and while it does wear its influences firmly front and centre, it's one of the best examples of pixel art Hotline Miami style gameplay we've played in absolutely ages. As for the story, well, it has its moments, although we can largely pass on much of it, which it doesn't really matter. We suspect, like others have said to us via Twitter, many of the loose ends will probably be tied up within the inevitable sequel, but still, we enjoyed it for its super punchy breakneck speed gameplay, and yes, a sequel, well, it would be most welcome. So there we go, many thanks for watching this video, and as always, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel if you've yet to do so. It really helps in pushing this channel and indie games further into more people's timelines, which of course is kinda neat. Either way, we'll see you all here soon for yet another indie game video.